Resource Center, and on behalf of the Community Action Partnership and the LCRC, as we call ourselves, we want to welcome you to our first national webinar series of our new Learning Community season. And we are so excited about the new Learning Community itself, in that it's about building capacity to increase impact for our agencies, particularly to increase impact as it relates to decreasing poverty or addressing poverty. And so we have a wonderful gift given to us through the Learning Community to talk about various approaches, innovative approaches that speak to practical ways that agencies can deal with this vast issue of poverty that our families and our communities face on a daily basis. We're sure that several of you are still signing on, and as you are signing on, I want to engage in a bit of housekeeping, and that is everyone on the webinar today is muted. And so the way that we will communicate with one another will be through our chat and our question and answer windows. And so if you have a technical question, so if you're unable to hear or see something, then you will need to place that question or need in the chat window, and a member of our team will respond to that. Otherwise, if you have a specific question related to the actual webinar on today, then please enter those questions in the Q&A chat window or the Q&A window. So without further ado, today's national webinar presentation is Understanding Trauma and its Impact on Families in Poverty. And we are pleased to have with us a wonderful presenter in Elena Cohen. And I will start by saying about Ms. Cohen, Elena, that she is a member of the Learning Community team, as she is serving as the subject matter expert for our Trauma-Informed Approaches Learning Community group, and we're going to say a little bit more about that later because we want you to consider possibly joining her group or maybe one of the other learning community groups being offered through the Learning Community. But in addition to that, she brings a wealth of experience and insight to this whole notion of trauma-informed approaches. She has been working in the field of children and family services in different capacities for over 35 years, and she has done that in various capacities, but in particular, she's had the opportunity to engage in trauma-informed work related to early childhood education, Head Start, home visiting, and child care and youth development. And as you can see on the screen, there's just a whole list, a whole array of areas that she has had an opportunity to think about and work on programmatically throughout her career. And so we're very excited that she will share with us today. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hand the baton over to Elena, who is going to share with us. And we hope that as you have questions, don't forget to put those in the question and answer box, and it's going to be a good webinar today. Elena?
Thank you, Tiffany. I am glad, I'm very happy that I am the first, the speaker on the very first of this series of webinars that's being put out, because I think that the issue of trauma is only recently being brought up to the forefront of the work that we do in poverty-related programs. I think that it's been a feature, the trauma-informed work has been a feature of mental health programs, but we need to figure out how we're going to work it through the programs that you all work with. And so today, the goal of the morning or the afternoon for some of you is first that we do some definitions. There's a lot of words being thrown out in terms of trauma and toxic stress and what is all of this, and we are going to do some definitions of what we mean by that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of trauma in the context of poverty. Trauma, as we're going to see, impacts every one of us, no matter the age, the socioeconomic status, the race. But in the context of poverty, it takes a very specific definition of the magnitude of the program. Why do we need to really engage in trauma work, the pervasiveness of it, and what we're seeing about the impact of it. Then we're going to talk very briefly about trauma-informed care. When we are going to talk about trauma-informed care, we're going to talk about very generic type of components. We cannot get here into very specific areas, and that is going to be followed by invitation to join the Learning Collaborative. I do have a not-so-hidden agenda, which is to entice you to join our Learning Collaborative. Tiffany is going to be working on it, talking about how to do it, but the agenda is that we convince you enough that this is an area that is going to be interesting to you, and focusing on this will make you join the Learning Collaborative. I hope you can all see the slide that I put in there, and I did it because I think that there is not any one of you or us here around the table that have not been there at the end of our rope and hear about, oh, you do this and you do that and learn relaxation and do this or that, and what we're saying is just get me more time or just get me more work. So we call that stress, and as I said before, we use the word stress to really define any time that we think that things are out of control, that we don't know how we're going to get to the end of that deadline, that we have piling up on our desks the papers, etc. I know none of you have been in there, but you know that. So what is what we mean by stress? Do we have a, yes, thank you. We really mean by stress are events or situations that are perceived as threatening. Those events or those situations that really are causing us a sense of fear, a sense of helplessness, a sense of I won't be able to finish with this work. I can't deal with this child who's misbehaving and he doesn't want to eat, and I don't know what to do with him or her. In terms of clients, I don't know what to do with this client that does not show up for the meetings that we have, or that I'm telling them do this or do that, and they don't follow with that. And those events are perceived as threatening because in some way they threaten us in our employment, in our, whether we're going to be able to pay our rent or feed our kids. And what they do is they cause a sense of fear. We sense that we're not going to be able to deal with this event, and so we're feeling fearful, we're feeling helpless, we don't know what we're going to be doing to solve that situation. The stress, the fear that we feel can set off an alarm system. An alarm system in which the brain is going to release hormones, and it's going to help our body figure out what is the best way to deal with this threat. This is a very, very ancient response in terms of the evolutionary development, because it really is born out of the fear that our very long-time ancestors and even animals were looking at some situation where there was a threat of death, where some animal was going to come and eat us, where they didn't know where they were going to get the food that they needed. And what their response was, their system, the evolutionary system's response, is that they could either fight the animal or fight the situation that was impinging on them. They could flight, put their tennis shoes and go out running, or they could freeze and be totally paralyzed in the way that they dealt with the threat. Once the threat was removed, when they had either fought, or flew out or froze, once the threat was removed, everything in their bodies returned to normal. And so they would go around, along doing whatever they needed to do in order to be able to continue with their life. Now, things are very different. We don't usually have, we could have, but we don't usually have this fear animal coming out and trying to eat us, or the impossibility of get any food, although that's a debatable question, because there are some of the families that you work with that may not know where their food is coming from. But usually what happens is that all of those threats to what we are, the fear of not being able to take care of the kids, or not fulfilling our job responsibilities, or not being able to respond to a deadline that we have, those threats are not threats that are in a way life or death as they were before, but they're still very, very strong for us. And so what happens is that the same alarm system that before we used to get ready to attack or to fly out or to freeze and not do anything, stay there. So if any of you have felt this sense of dread, and I'm never going to be doing this, and the anxiety or choking or the rapid heartbeat, the wobbly legs, the shakiness, the feeling faint, all of those symptoms we have now, and we really many times don't even understand where they're coming from. We feel that way. We don't really consider the threat that we have a very serious one, but we still have all of these symptoms. Well, this is where we start thinking about the issue of stress to trauma. Okay, we all of us experience, in children included, even infants experience stressful events. And again, remember that stressful events are those that make us feel like we are in danger of something. For young kids, for very young kids, for infants, stressful events are not having a parent around or not having a caretaker around, which is the situation where, because they depend on the parents to be able to do that. We have stressful events that affect us sometimes directly. We obviously have the fear of a car accident, or as I said, of a child thinking that their mom or dad or caretaker is not coming and taking care of them. But we also do that indirectly when somebody else that we depend on is going to not be there, or is not going to be responsive to what we need. So we have some positive stress. Positive stress, which are, if you can remember taking an exam, taking an exam is a positive stress because although it raises your stress response, it raises your adrenaline, it makes you study, it makes you be prepared, it makes you deal with the issues that are relative to that. And when you take an exam, let's just talk about the driver's license exam, which I think for everybody is a stressful situation because you may not pass it and therefore you may not be able to drive. But once you've done that, once you've passed your exam, it fosters development because you're going to be able then to drive and to do all the things that you have to do. And positive stress for a young child, if we think about a young child, is going the first time to school. All of those of you that have children or that are that work with young children know that the very first time that kids come to school, it's very stressful to leave their parents and not to have somebody that they know. But with the help of the teachers and of the parents and et cetera, all that stress becomes a positive one because they become better. And we all experience those events which are going to move us to do something better. There are tolerable stress, what we call stressors or events that are difficult. For example, the death of a parent, the actual car accident, sometimes surgery that are tolerable in the sense that they occur usually one time and with the proper support, and this is very important here, with the proper support and with the proper coping skills. For example, in the death of a parent, it is absolutely normal to have a grief reaction and to work on that with the positive support from people around us, with the work that we do, et cetera. We are able to reduce that stressful response and then become closer to the memories, the positive memories that we have. The case of a child, the fact that, you know, the pet dies at the beginning, it's very, very stressful. But with time and importantly, and this is very importantly for all of you that are working with families, with young children, but also with two generations. You know, many of you are working with the two generations in what we called before family-centered practice. Now some programs call them two generations. But if you think about that, there are stressors that all families are going to face that with your support and with your help, they're going to only occur for a brief period of time, and again, the situation is going to change. And then we get to what we call toxic or traumatic stress, and that's actually more of the theme and the topic that is here today we're thinking about. Toxic stress is a way of really it's another way of saying trauma, and so that's why sometimes they say trauma, sometimes they mean toxic stress. And what it really means, and it becomes toxic, is because it's excessive. It's really prolonged. It really lasts for a long time. And the brain stress system is activated for a very long period of time. So what it does when you are under toxic stress, you can go to the next one. When you are dealing with toxic stress, is that because it is so prolonged, and because your brain stress response, and here again, folks, I'm talking about any child from infant to 95 or whatever you live. It is something that is not particular to any one age, because each one of the ages, as we are going to see later, is going to be activated, and the response is going to be a strong one. And what it really does is that this response, the activated response that we talked about, the hormones in the system, the adrenaline, etc., overwhelms and interferes with life, with development. We are going to see it just in a couple of more minutes how it impacts every age. But the important thing now is that if we have positive stress, as we talked before, if we have tolerable stress, and we do not support and deal with these issues, what's going to happen is that it's going to become toxic stress, and that will have a much increased risk for mental and physical distress. You have to remember that the experiences that for children, the experiences since they're born, and for adults, the experience of everyday life become part of our being. And we have, as we're going to talk in a little while, an invisible backpack, okay? We carry with us an invisible backpack. And this invisible backpack is full of all of these events that at some time have had an impact on our lives. We may not be reminded of where this is coming from, but the body stays very, very active. And what it does is that the trauma memories, the trauma of those events that really have stayed with us are very different than the other kinds of memories. And they're very different because, as we've been talking, it just re-stimulates all that adrenaline in your body, all that way to respond, and any kind of very small reminder can bring up all of that, even if you don't have that in that minute, in that term. I'm reminded of children that you probably work with as teenagers, or even your own children or yourself, that had a very traumatic bullying experience when they were young. And as they grow up, it can become that anybody that's telling them something, even if it's not remotely related to the issue that he or she was bullied on, it brings a lot of memory and it activates the system again. So trauma memories is something that that we need to talk to. Toxic stress is chronic, is repeated. The brain continues to release the hormones, and if the threat continues, the alarm system stays on the alert. You're always on the alert that you're seeing danger everywhere. And so when we talk about chronic trauma or chronic toxic stress, we're talking about the fact that it is that is something that stays in our system. We have several different kinds of stress, or are defined. Toxic stress is the same, is the one that really your body responds for a certain amount of time with the same stress or hormones. But there are acute events, single events, car accidents, dog bites, medical procedures. Those of you that were once in front of a terrorist attack, or that imagine for a second the folks that were around the Planned Parenthood office that was threatened the last time. This is a very acute event, something that happens one time, but that it can have a very strong impact on you. A car accident that's bad enough where people die that you can either see or you can watch, can have tremendous traumatic repercussions for you. But then there is also what we call the complex trauma. And complex or cumulative one, or is usually the type of trauma that is caused either that is continuing. Think about child abuse and neglect. Think about domestic violence. Think about living in areas where there's community violence. don't know how folks are in other parts of the country, but right now in the Washington, D.C. area, there seems to be a community violence event almost every day. I mean, and kids and adults are exposed to it when they go to work, when they go to daycare, et cetera. So it's very cumulative, excuse me. And it is especially difficult and especially complex when it's caused by a person that you know. So if it's a domestic violence partner, if it's a teacher, if it's a sexual abuse case by a member of your family that you know, school shootings, which it happens in environments where in theory you're more secure than anywhere else. Actually, if we go to the numbers, schools are still one of the safest places where kids can be. But whenever there is a school shooting, what happens is these kids are being exposed to a traumatic event in a place that's supposed to protect them. And the most important part of it, remember, going back to the first slide, is trauma or stress is a response to something that threatens your psychological or your physical self. So the issue is, if you are in a situation like a school shooting, like a domestic violence, in a domestic violence home, either as a domestic violence survivor, partner, or the child looking at the mom or the dad being in that situation, it would be a complex and a cumulative type of trauma. Then we have what we call secondary trauma, and I do want to stop for a couple of minutes on the secondary trauma, because that's going to be one of my most important pitches for you to join this learning collaborative. And secondary trauma really refers to the stress reaction resulting from exposure to another person. And what it is really that every one of the staff people or the agencies working with people that are in front of trauma are exposed to traumatic experiences themselves. As professionals, caretakers, they are in a situation where the trauma of their clients sometimes re-stimulates trauma that they themselves have been in front of. Many of the folks that work in our programs, in our agencies, are folks that they themselves are exposed to constant threats. And so secondary trauma would be one of the areas that every one of the agencies working on this collaborative will have to address. You cannot have a staff person at any level, from the higher up manager to the person who cleans the building or is the receptionist, that would not have to deal with stress reactions that the families can have, and we'll talk about that. And then the last one is what we call historical trauma, and this is a collective kind of emotional trauma. We see it very much so in Native American generations, and it goes from a history of genocide. It is transmitting multi-generational, and families that have been either slaves or that have been in situations of genocide. There are, for example, many studies that look at the issue of families that come from the Holocaust, Jewish families that are a result of the Holocaust, and that for many, many generations they still have this historical trauma that they won't allow them to do. We need now to do a poll, and let me see how we're going to do this. The first question that I want to poll with you is, I want to know what are some of the toxic stressors in your client's life. What are, how do we do this, Sanji? Tell me out. Tell me how we do it.
Sure, so there'll be a poll that will open up on your right side panel near where you have your chat and Q&A window, and that will be opening momentarily.
And so we need to be able to know and remember that many, many, many times, folks, we don't know that. People come, and I call it the invisible backpack, the invisible suitcase, because we come with this to receive services, and maybe the services are daycare or health care or any of the issues that that are not necessarily what they come from, but all of these toxic stressors are there, putting a very heavy weight on that background, and we may end up and we may or may not know it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Should we give a couple of minutes to look at that?
Yeah, you have about 40 more seconds to get your answers in, and there are two different questions that are listed on this. One asking about your client.
Can we do the clients first, and then
and then yourself? Yes. And I see that many of you have already gotten started on that poll. You do have about 20 more seconds, and we will be able to display the aggregate results of that in just a few seconds. So you have about 10 more seconds to get those answers in. All right, the poll is officially closed. We are going to try to grab those last couple of people that were in process, so we'll have your results for you in just a moment.
And we're doing the two at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, probably obviously. I am very, very thankful to my colleagues here who are doing this, because I have no clue about how to do it.
Yes, and as we're waiting for it to come up, I didn't introduce the training and technical assistance team that is lurking in the background, helping all of this to happen for us today. Sanji Johnson and Cashin Yu from the training and technical assistance team here at the partnership. So it takes a village to build capacity.
You bet.
All right, so it looks like the top answer that came in, no surprise, is on poverty, with 61% of you putting in that. Though we are grouped fairly close together, it looks like, with unemployment, homelessness, drug use, and child abuse. And then we also incarceration in that category as well, as pretty close there. And then coming down around a third or so, community violence, problems at school, and then down towards the bottom, those natural disasters and terrorism. So,
so now the second one,
Sure. And the second one, it looks like, which is asking about for your life. We have a lot more variation on this. The highest I actually see is around 33% unemployment. And we range all the way down to incarceration at around 11%. So a lot more variation when you're looking at your life.
Thank you. And thank you for doing that. The real purpose to do that is to really realize, as we're going to be talking after, that many of the issues that your clients are working or are struggling with are issues that you yourself or your family may be struggling with, and that's what becomes so important for you as the agent of change to be able to deal with. As you can probably guess, the the way that a stressor becomes a traumatic incident or requires a traumatic response, stress response, really depends on several things. So the first one is the perception of danger, what we talked about in the stress to trauma continuum. So something that is a danger for you may not be exactly a danger for the person that's next to you. And so when we're looking at our clients and when we're looking at ourselves, we have to be very careful on really knowing what we can't say. Not doing well in school is traumatic for everybody. There are some folks where not doing well in school today may not be as traumatic as for other ones, which will lead to dropout, etc. So the perception of danger is one that is an important one to take into account when we're looking at stress to trauma continuum. The second one, I'm going to do relationship to victim and perpetrator because I think I mentioned that, but I didn't talk about it as much. And the issue is the closer the person who is in front of an event that's traumatic is to the victim or the perpetrator, the worse it is. Sometimes we see events on the TV, for example, and on the news, and we are very shaken because it's in a place that we know or in a corner that we know or near our house, etc. But it is probably somebody that we do know or we don't know at all. And so as much as it is something that shakes, and it should shake us up, any kind of violence like that should have a response from us. We shouldn't forget that. But it's not going to be affecting us the same way. As soon as that victim becomes somebody that gets closer to you, then that becomes a much more traumatic experience because you are related to the victim. And of course, in that sense, the worst kind of traumatic experience is that what happens in the home for children and for adults, because it is the one that is the one that's going to be closest to you and the one that's going to require a response at all. And in that sense, for children to do substance abuse, to see their parents using drugs, to see their mom and dad fighting, to see the family being disrupted by immigration and throwing out some of the children from the home, etc. That is the worst, of course, and it is the most traumatic. The other thing that impact depends on is the past experience with the event, how frequent it's been, how intense it's been, how close as we can. And the two last ones are the ones that as we work with families in poverty and families that are affected by traumatic events, need to focus on is the adversity phase before and after. And before, there is not too much that we can change about what families or individuals in that family or us as such can change. But it is very important to know what adversities have been found before, because that's going to be helpful to us to plan for the future. And after, the adversities facing after is very important, because this means that is where you as an agency, you as a person, you as a mom, you as a partner, have all the ability to do and change some and reduce the amount of adversities that the child has or the adult has. And you don't necessarily need to be taking the adversity out. For example, we have many families where there is domestic violence. And as we all know with domestic violence, women, especially women, but I'm sure it's only men, they keep coming back to that situation. Or the other thing is they cannot leave because of economic, housing, other issues. But that doesn't mean that we cannot provide support to the child or the mom, even though that situation still remains. There are many things that we can do to support the child and to lessen the amount of trauma that which is very related to the presence, availability of supports to protect. We do know that the presence of supports in the community and in the programs is what makes a whole big difference on that. The other factor that is very important in the impact that trauma is going to have on families is what we call the protective factors. Those characteristics and events that are really going to protect the person of the stressful event. There are there are several protective factors that folks have shown evidence that help families, and if and when you start with the learning community, we're gonna look for those, and we're gonna look for those because those are the ones that we can change, the ones that we can put all our protective factors in adults, our positive families environment. Self-sufficiency is one of the ways that we reduce a lot of the stressful circumstances with food and homelessness and all of that. And those, I know that many of you are working on self-sufficient and working on two-generational approaches to that, and therefore that is going to be something that you can stress. In the next picture, I stress the fact that protective factors can be at many, many, many levels. So we have a storm, or the image of a storm here, and we have a young child with boots and a raincoat, and those are individual protective factors that we can protect and support. And then we have a family with umbrellas supporting the children as a protection from the rain. But we also have a home, and we have a roof, which is more what we're calling the community that can offer the support for that, and that can build what we call the resiliency, the ability, as we say, and we're going to say always, we're not going to take stress away. Stress is part of life, and some of the stress is positive, so we can't take that away. We're always going to be facing. But our ability to be resilient, to recover, to bounce back, to be able to cope with the protective factors is going to be one that's going to be important for us. And now I would like to, again, a poll, and this poll is important. We talked about the risk factors in your family's life. But I want you to tell me which are some of the, I think there's something wrong with this question, because the question is, what are some of the protective factors in your life and in the life of your client? But it talks about child abuse and neglect and community violence. I think I probably made a mistake there in doing those responses, because it should be the opposite. So there it is. There it is. Okay. The question is, what have been protective factors for you? What has helped you? Think about difficult times in your past. Any difficult time that you had in your, what are the persons that gave you support? what are the factors that made your life easier? And I'm talking about you first as a staff person. What are some things that happened in your life that made your life better, that served as protection for you? Then we have caring adults, nonviolence or positive violent environment. You did well in school. What are some of these factors that were helpful to you? Can you put that so that they can? And you can understand that the reason why I'm doing that is because those are going to be later the one things that you're going to look for as you start dealing with your own stress life, and that also you're going to look in your clients to see how you can build on that. Done? Oh, okay.
Keep talking.
Well, caring adults. There are many people, when I do this kind of thing with life, not that you're not alive, but with life groups and direct training, you would be surprised how many people tell you, I had a grandfather that would sit with me and talk me to bed. I had a neighbor that was always there when there was nobody at home. I could run into the house. So protective adults in your community is one that is really, really important one. It's spiritual orientation. It has been found that people that have that orientation, and it is not necessarily the going to church or the going to any of the religious institution that you follow, but finding meaningful work, finding meaning in the life that you have, and that helps. That helps a lot. Having high expectations from family, that's one of the areas that that also, even though we were facing this and that and the other problem, my family said, you're going to finish and you're going to college and you're doing that. It doesn't matter. We can move to the next one. I don't want to lose a whole lot of time of this. I want to go to the next one. It's fine. And the same thing with the risk factors. Risk factors is the opposite of the protective factors, and it's those experiences, those characteristics that it's going to be making more difficult to function. So violent homes, as we had said, not learning disabilities or any kind of disability makes for difficult development, and very, very important, a risk factor for children and for adults is exposure to violence. And exposure to violence has been shown, has been shown to really increase the issues that kids have. It has even been shown for very young kids to change their brain structure. So it is a factor that is very, very hard. I'm going to go briefly here, and it is part of this is to convince you of the fact that doing the learning community would be a helpful thing for you. Why address trauma? Well, the first one is that trauma is pervasive in the families that you live, and it is pervasive because of those that you see there. We see it in the kids and youth in the juvenile justice and et cetera. The second reason why we need to address trauma is because the consequences are long-lasting. For children in school, for youth, for mental problems, for adults, it's been shown by the adverse childhood experiences research that there is a host of learning and mental health problems that they see. The impact on children is one that as I said, the potential for altering brain structure, for altering the attachment process, etc. The impact for adults, we mentioned the ACEs, study, which is the adverse childhood experiences. And so we have compulsive sexual behavior, binging, purging, all the kinds of things that are done to limit and to drown the kinds of things that we do. It impacts the family as a whole. For those of you working in Head Start that have to be doing a family center program, for those of you working with two-generation programs, for those of you working with fatherhood programs, including fathers in your programs, or self-sufficiency, the impact of trauma is going to diminish the kinds of things that, the kinds of outcomes that you can look at. And this, I want to just say a couple of minutes. They gave me already a sign saying hurry up. But this is one that I really, really want to stress because I think it's even a key to all of the work that you do. The impact on staff and on the outcomes of your program. Staff are stewards not only of those who allow them in their lives, but to their own capacity to do their work. As you probably know, the most important tool that you have as a staff member, and when I say a staff, I'm talking about all of the staff in the program, is their own capacity to be helpful, to be trustworthy, to work with this client, to protect the well-being of staff. And not only that, the high turnover, we all know that the work that you do, you don't do for money, that you don't do for excellent conditions, you don't do for any of that. You don't do you do that for the satisfaction that you get. You got into these programs to be helpful. Are we going to be able to do
I don't think we'll have time
to that. Okay, so let me just say that I had do it, and you can look into that. But a real important set of symptoms of staff that are impacted by the same trauma is hopelessness. You don't think that your clients are going to be able to change. Inability to listen because of the inability to listen and avoidance of clients is going to be because you can't stand them telling things that really stimulate the own fear and danger and trauma reaction that you had. The sleeplessness, the 2 o'clock in the morning waking up thinking about a client or not being able to sleep, which leads to chronic exhaustion, the physical symptoms. And so the issue is, in order for you to, we're not going to have the time to do it, but in order for you to be able to do any work, in order for organizations to be able to figure out how to support their staff so that you don't that the turnover is not very high, so that you get to the outcomes that you need, that you serve your clients better, you need to do what we're calling trauma-informed care. Basically, your whole program needs to acknowledge the fact that trauma is a very critical path of all the healing and recovery on your clients and on your staff. You need to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma, which is not obvious always because it's in your backbite, it's not there. You need to integrate the knowledge into the policies, the procedures, the practice. And very importantly, especially for mental health programs and the programs that work with kids, is to seek to avoid re-traumatization. I'm just going to go very, very briefly to the last part where it goes to some of the ways that early childhood programs and so this is very important. When we're talking about trauma-informed care, and you can go back and look at the slides later, and you're going to be able to see all of the stuff that was there. But when we're talking about trauma-informed care, we're not talking about making people therapists, okay? We're talking about people relating therapeutically, if you want, relating in a trauma-informed way to their clients. So for early care and education, it's the critical piece is to help children feel safe, to strengthen the parent-child relationship, and to really address issues of children experiencing traumatic care. So we can do all of these, help you deal with managing challenging behavior, do all of that. With the next program, I think it's homelessness. It's another one where the program has to provide trauma-informed care, has proven evidence that it improves the outcomes for both the kids and the families. For programs working with pediatric health, and when pediatric health, I'm talking about WIC, I'm talking about all of the well baby clinics, all of the places where it's the only one that families go when they go as first step. So I'm gonna cut it here because I need to open the pediatric care providers. We have domestic violence program. We have other programs. And again, it's not making therapists out of any of the staff. It's really talking about making your program trauma-informed. And yes, realizing that there are evidence-based programs, therapeutic, that we can refer to you and we can help you find in your areas the ones that are appropriate. I'm going to open it to questions right now. And then after that, Tiffany is going to tell you about the Learning Collaborative, and if there are some questions left over, I'll be happy to be there myself. Any questions?
And so I know that there was one question that was raised about the need for you to talk a little bit more about what a non-professional could do versus a medical professional yes. or a mental health professional. And I think you kind of touched on that just a little bit.
Yes.
But it's something else that you would like to
yes, it's a very, very important question, because any kind of staff can relate in a trauma-informed way with their clients, and not necessarily the clients that have to be referred for therapeutic programs, that also exists. But we have ways of doing screening. We have ways of working with your program to avoid any re-traumatization in the reception room, in the classroom for families, for those that are working with children. We have ways to deal with challenging behaviors in the classroom. We have ways also with the staff. We have ways to offer support to the staff that goes through kind of traumatic situations, which are for everybody. Very, very small amount, a small percentage of folks that are that have traumatic stress end up in a mental health program because of resources, for one. And at the end of the presentation, I have some of the systemic barriers to doing the program, which I didn't go over. But it's, you know, most of it is there is limited resources in the community and limited resources for families. And I have to say that for families going to a therapy program, it is very time-consuming, and they have to go somewhere else with the thousands of things that they have to do themselves. So the issue here is not to become a therapist, but to make your programs trauma-informed so that they can better serve their group. I hope that responds to the question.
Thank you very much. And we have about 1 minute left before our time concludes today. And Elena, thank you for enlightening us, because I would say that for many of the agencies within our network, maybe we have touched on different aspects of what you've talked about.
Some of them have already started.
Right.
It is a matter of having them help the other ones and working with them to improve what they're doing.
Yes. But I know I learned a lot today, and that is, you know, as it relates to this traumatic stress or toxic stress, that it can have some very detrimental impact on families and ultimately communities. However, we don't need to feel helpless as caregivers or service providers. There are supports or things that we can do, and you will create opportunities in your learning community group for agencies to think strategically about how they might approach some of the support systems, so to speak. But the other thing that I know that you have said in the past is, like, this whole notion of trauma-informed or sort of being trauma-ready is an agency mindset. So it's not just focused on the specific program, but it's kind of like an attitude that the agency would have.
Policies, procedures, and training, and a lot of issues around. And yes, somebody mentioned the participation in Girl Scouts. Evidently, that sports, that's a great opportunity for kids to be supported, yes.
Yeah, so thank you again, and we hope that members who are listening today would consider signing up, applying to be a part of our learning community. Elena, as I said, will be leading the Trauma-Informed Approaches LCG. There are several other groups that will be available, from place-based strategies for community revitalization to bundling services to improve outcomes to financial empowerment for families, decreasing homelessness and national poverty trends. And so there is a way to get involved to continue to fight poverty for your families that you serve and for your communities. We thank you for your attention today. If you would like to learn more about the learning community, you may visit the partnership's website at www.communityactionpartnership.com and click on Learning Communities Resource Center, and all the information about how you can actually apply to become a member of the learning community group or to follow a group is available there. And you can also always contact me. Once again, my name is Tiffany Marley. I'm the project director for the Learning Communities Resource Center, or a member of the team, Sanji Dawson-Johnson or Natalie Kramer. We're available for you. We thank you again. Elena, please join us for continued conversations. This is a series, and so be on the lookout for more presentations that will be coming in 2016 to talk about all of these very important topics for our network. And once again, the learning community is about building capacity to increase impact. We thank you and have a great day.
Bye-bye. See, I had it for an hour and a half. That's why I was really slow, because I had